Hello friends, after a very long time we will be having some videos on very small issues related to your syllabus, important otherwise, but not well understood in general. For example, in race people think it's very easy. We will touch upon firstly the dermatoglyphics. Derma is skin, glyphic is the curves. Our base is a book by Cummins and Midlow, 1943, Fingerprints, Palms and Soles. The base of my study, I don't know, it's almost 50 years ago. I was taught, I think, I'm not sure, by Professor Kaul at Punjab University, Chandigarh. Then some inputs were given by Professor De Wilde, came from Holland, now it is Netherlands. And then Professor Surendranath of Delhi University. And in between, I had some talks with Professor Mawalwala of Toronto University. Now, to start with, all of us know about the fingerprints, but one thing surprising may look is that if you join the top fragments of your fingers, you will realize that small minute ridges which are there, small minute raised lines we call ridges, you will find that the continuity from one finger to the other. These fingerprints, these are formed from 10th to 12th week in the prenatal period, and they fully mature in another 10 weeks or so. And because in 10th week fingers are not fully developed in continuity, you can see easily. But now when fingers differentiate and length is different, so you cannot match it. The study of fingerprints, you can say, started in 1897, and it was two Indians, two sub-inspectors in Kolkata Police, Huck and Bose. But the credit goes to the Director General of Police there, Mr. Henry. The study, the base, we always talk about Henry, not Huck and Bose. We'll just talk about fingerprints today. The fingers that we have, the tip of the fingers, these ridges, they make certain patterns that we call finger ball patterns. And 4 major types are there, and with their subtypes. Firstly, you have arches. The first arches, ridges starting from one side of the finger and passing through and terminating on the other side, like this. And while drawing these figures, you always have to remember that ridges never cut across each other. They may meet, forming a delta or a triradius. We'll talk later. This is called plain arch. And then you have tented arch. You find the shape like a tent. This is called tented arch. This is plain arch. About 5 to 10% is the frequency of arches the world over. And then the most common pattern is what we call a loop. In a loop, you have a place where 3 ridges coming from 3 different directions are meeting, joining. You call it a delta or you call it a triradius. In the middle, you have a ridge that forms the core of the pattern, and then ridges are passing through that. This also looks like that a delta is there, but the difference is that between the core and the ridge and the triradius, at least 2 ridges must be cutting across, then only we call it a loop, otherwise it's a ridge. And loops can be radial or ulnar. If they are opening towards radius, towards the thumb side, you can say it is called radial loop, and if it is towards the ulnar side, you call it ulnar loop. Shape is just the mirror opposite of it. Then you have what you call whorls. The classification may differ from a person to person, expert to expert, but we have whorls. One is a concentric whorl, each ridge making a pattern. You have a triradius here, another here, then ridges cutting across, and that way easy one. Then you have a single spiral whorl, one ridge making a spiral. One ridge triradius is somewhere here, other is somewhere here, and it is like this, and then ridge is cutting across and making a pattern. A slightly complex is what we call double spiral whorl. Two ridges starting from the center and completing the pattern, and this we call double spiral whorl. Again triradius here, another triradius here, and again you have parallel ridges and here and there. This is called whorl concentric, whorl single spiral, and whorl double spiral. Then many experts, they include the fourth category within this one only, that is composites. In composites we have first is twin loop. Shape of the loop is like this. This is the shape of one loop. This is the shape of another loop. Of course, plenty of ridges are going around. Then one ridge coming parallel and making a delta here, another one coming and making a delta here, and then parallel ridges thereafter. This is twin loop. Then you have lateral pocket loop. Firstly a loop, and then another loop surrounding it. Then a ridge here, another ridge here, then again parallel ridges, one triradius, other triradius. Always remember, ridges do not have any triradius. A loop has always one. A whorl has always two. Composites may, not necessarily three, but mostly two. And third is, and 60 to 70% of the patterns the world over, they are loops. And 30 to 35 are these whorls and composites. Then you have central pocket loop, you have a whorl inside, you have a loop outside. One triradius is here, then ridges are running parallel, and another triradius, and then parallel ridges, so on. These are the finger ball patterns, and very rarely you find all the patterns in a single textbook, at least in India. And on the basis of these patterns, we had the way to study. We had what we call Fruhata index, 3 indices, Fruhata index. We had Dank-Meisner index, and we had pattern intensity index. And simple formulae are there: whorls divided by loops into 100, then arches divided by whorls into 100, and this is a slightly complex pattern intensity index. Here we are counting the total number of triradii, because whorls have 2 triradius each, and loops have 1. Then number of fingers is 10, then divided by 100. Talking about the total number of per finger the pattern intensity that is here. Not only that, we have many more indicators. We have like ridge count. The number of ridges starting from core to the triradius. How many ridges are there that cut across if a single line is drawn? For each finger, this will be differential ridge count. For all the 10 fingers, this will be total ridge count. These dermatoglyphics are very helpful in identification of racial types. Traditionally these were, but as we know, the UNESCO statement on race said that intraracial variation is much more than interracial variation. If we have the exact wording, it said average difference between two individuals of the same race is much more than the total difference between two races. Means intraracial variation is much more, and that way even dermatoglyphics cannot be used as a criterion for racial classification. Second use of dermatoglyphics is in the crime scene and forensics. Many complex things are there, but to make your job simple, say for example, if you have a loop, let us say a loop is there. So this will be your differential ridge count, and making it combine all this will be total ridge count. Then one identification can be this is a fork, a ridge dividing into two. This is merging, another ridge is coming. This is splinter. Then this may be a cut, split. But if an injury is there because of some, say, knife or blade, it may be like this. The individual print may get mutilated. But somehow many more signs are there in personal identification, but all of them may be required, may not be required. But one thing is here, the database of fingerprints is much more than the database for DNA. In that sense, fingerprints are much more helpful in crime detection compared to the DNA. So they can ask you a question on dermatoglyphics. Now one thing is there about dermatoglyphics, that it is the most stable criterion. It is polygenic in nature, and therefore mutations do not easily affect. So if we are asked which is the best criterion amongst all, obviously it is dermatoglyphics. You can also be asked in personal identification, when you talk about age and gender and DNA fingerprinting, dermatoglyphics I told you, because big database is there, it can be used there as well. And not necessarily they may ask you in race or in personal identification, but wherever they may ask you just dermatoglyphics, you will have to talk about both. I think it helps you. Next time we will talk about Palmer dermatoglyphics, and again how it is used in the crime scene, and also how we can identify Down syndrome on the basis of that. But before I end, let me admit that most of my videos, they are spontaneous expressions. So at times I miss some important points, but flow is more important. You people are wise enough to add to the knowledge, and you can comment also if you want. Thank you.